Nasion is the most anterior point between frontal and nasal bones on the frontonasal suture. Orbitale is the lowest point on the inferior bony margin of orbit. Sella. Sella represents the midpoint of pituitary fossa or sella turcica. Porion. Porion is the highest bony point on the upper margin of external auditory meatus. Anterior nasal spine. In short, it is called as ANS. It is the anterior tip of the sharp bony process of maxilla. Point A or subspinale. It is formed between the anterior nasal spine and alveolar crest. That is a deep point in the midline between two central incisors. Is called as point A. Point B. Point B is the deepest point in the midline between the alveolar crest of mandible and the mental process. It is also called as Supramentale. Posterior nasal spine. In short, it is called as PNS. It is formed by the intersection of continuation of anterior wall of pterygopalatine fossa and floor of nose. Marks the distal limit of maxilla. Pogonion. Pogonion is the most anterior point of bony chin in the median plane. Menton. Menton is the most inferior midline point on the mandibular symphysis. Next, Gnathion. Gnathion is the most anteroinferior point on the symphysis of chin. It is constructed by the intersecting a line drawn perpendicular to the line connecting Menton and Pogonion. Now coming to Gonion. Gonion is constructed by the junction of ramal plane and mandibular plane. Articulare. Articulare is the point of junction of posterior border of ramus and inferior border of the basilar part of occipital bone. Basion. Basion is the median point of anterior margin of foramen magnum. Ptm Point. Ptm Point is the intersection of inferior border of foramen rotundum with the posterior wall of pterygomaxillary fissure. Next, Bolton Point. It is the highest point on the posterior condylar notch of the occipital bone. Coming to Condylion. It is the most superior point on the head of the condyle. Next is Prosthion, also called as Supradentale. It is the lowest and most anterior point on the alveolar bone in the midline between the upper central incisor. Infradentale. It is the highest and most anterior point on the alveolar process in the midline between the mandibular central incisor. Subnasale. Subnasale is the point where the lowest border of nose meets the outer contour of the upper lip.